This is Annie Kid Wolf, and you're watching This is Punk Rock of Punk Globe Magazine.
1, 2, 3, 4. Punk rock, punk rock, punk rock. 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 It ain't brain surgery. Punk rock, punk rock, punk rock. 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 It ain't brain surgery. 1, 2, 3, 4.
Uncle John, don't worry. Don't let anybody hurt you. You duck down behind here and don't let them see you.
I don't know how I got this way.
So you're telling us that your Uncle John has managed to stay alive all this time without getting shot in the head or burnt in a bonfire?
He could not have survived all this time without my help.
Hey! I'm looking at you and I'd like to chomp into you.
And somehow I believe you're not kidding about that.
Even if you don't get bitten, you might get shot.
Zombies need to be spiked.
You evil undead menace!
There's some great perks for famous zombies.
I hope Uncle John's good and hungry.
You're so cute.
No chance.
Well, I'm having the time of my death.
But back then, they were dangerous.
You wouldn't believe it, but all the chicks run from me.
Hello, here we are today with John Russo. He is
Nice to see you.
Nice to see you too, my dear. He is, of course.
Been doing a lot of thinking about Frank and the Monsters.
Oh, yes.
Further thoughts, but nothing's totally crystallized yet.
Oh, I got some great thoughts too. I was actually doing some brainstorming before, and I'm going to run some stuff with you by you after our call. But yeah, welcome to our little show here called This is Punk Rock. I know you're not a punk rock guy, but stuff that you've created has created a lot of influence with a lot of different punk rockers. So I wanted to touch on some of those cool things. Of course, you are the writer and the creator of Night of the Living Dead. You created the whole idea of flesh-eating zombies. So pretty iconic, my friend.
Yep, turned out that way.
So I want to ask you a little bit about your past and about putting together the initial Night of the Living Dead so that we can just kind of get some groundwork. And then I want to go into the whole idea of Return of the Living Dead and how that became such a punk icon of a movie.
Okay.
Okay, so Night of the Living Dead, when you guys put that together, it was a time a long time ago, and it was a 68. Is that the year that?
Well, the movie came out in 68. It was 1967 in the winter of 66 to 67 that we started. George Romero and I were the two writers in our little company. We only had about 5 full-time people, and then we did a lot of commercial and industrial films. Always wanted to be feature filmmakers. That was the goal. But anyway, we were the two writers, so we started bashing ideas around.
And what
And
inspired you for it, though? What inspired you to start those kind of ideas? Like, what were you in?
we thought we were going to do kind of a sci-fi horror comedy. There almost would have been E.T. before there was E.T. And
Right.
we had a lot of script ideas. It was about kids from outer space catting around the universe in their little hot rod, flying saucer, or whatever their space vehicle was. And they come down to Earth and they meet up with these Earth kids and befriend them. And then, so the Earth kids have all these extraterrestrial powers that they can start playing pranks on the people in their little town, especially the sheriff, who's was kind of a Keystone Cop kind of guy, and we call him Sheriff Suck. And we figured
Did
George
you make
Costanza.
this? Did you end up ever making
We
this?
started writing it, and
Okay.
it really was funny.
But it's
And
not, you've never made
but
it?
well, the problem is that uh, we didn't have a lot of money. We had almost no money, and in those days it was real. Nowadays you can do, with AI and so on, and you can do saucer landings and things, but back then
Yeah.
you couldn't.
Right.
It was an expensive process to do that. So one day in the winter, it was a really freezing day, and George Romero and I went out with a 16 millimeter Arriflex just to see if we could catch film things that would look like they were extraplanetary, like things like portions of water towers or whatever we thought might work. And the camera froze solid. It was so cold the gears of the camera wouldn't even turn after a while. And George left a $150 light meter hanging on a wrought iron fence at the lookout in Mount Washington that looks right down over the three rivers of Pittsburgh. Beautiful view, and that's why people come to that lookout. So we gave up, lost the light meter, and now we're thinking, what can we do? And I told George, well, whatever we do ought to start in a cemetery because people find cemeteries scary. Even Abbott and Costello meet Dracula.
Yeah.
It's scary. It's funny, but it's scary with the candles moving all over the coffin, and Lou sees it, but Bud doesn't. And so I started working on a thing where aliens are already here. That's why we don't have to show them landing, and strange deaths and circumstances start happening in this small town. And it started out with kids in a cemetery, teenagers who have stolen a case of beer and they're hiding it in the cemetery. And one of them actually, it was Halloween night, and one of them was actually wearing a ghoul mask.
Wow.
And they get caught. And the lead kid they all get punished, but the lead kid gets grounded and he runs away from home and he's running through the woods, and he steps through a pane of glass in the ground, and under that pane of glass is a rotting corpse. And he falls right down through the glass and onto the corpse. And that's about as far as I got. I had other ideas what I was going to do with it. And meantime, George came in, and he had been writing something that had this girl and her brother visiting their father's grave in a cemetery, of course. And they get chased. He gets his head bashed in, and the girl gets chased, and so on. And I read it, and I said, George, this has all the right twists and turns and suspense and so on, but who's chasing this girl? And he said, I don't know. I said, well, seems to me they could be dead people. He said, that's good. I said, but what are they after? You don't say that either. He said, I don't know. And I said, why don't we use my flesh eating idea? So that's how they became dead people after human flesh. He said, that's good. Well, then we beat some ideas around, and we had one long kind of script meeting told the other people, Carl Hardman, Marilyn Eastman, and the other couple people in our little company, and nobody was coming up with any ideas except me. And I kind of took the lead in that discussion. I was wondering why George
just about
wasn't
you.
coming up.
One thing about you is that you are very prolific. You have
That's
been
for
writing scripts and books
sure.
forever and just never stop. You've probably written 10 last year. Like,
At
you're
least.
incredible. Yeah, you're incredible.
but
So that's your
but
brain.
at that time,
Okay.
I didn't consider myself so. In fact, I kind of envied Rudy Ritchie. He wasn't he was one of our close associates, but not in the company. But I thought Rudy was better than I was at plots and titles and so on. And that was what kind of opened the floodgates in my mind. That's what proved to me that, hey, I am good at this. I didn't know why George wasn't coming up with anything. Right in that meeting, I laid out the whole thing. Practically there had to be an escape attempt or else the movie's over. The escape attempt had to fail or else the movie's over. And so on, like that, I would say things like that to a whole group of people. So, they're going to have to figure out what resources do they have in this farmhouse they can use to try to escape and so on. And then I just took whatever ideas were there and whatever George wrote, and I wrote the whole rest. I rewrote what he had written, made it conform to the idea of dead people after human flesh, and then I wrote the whole rest of it myself in about 3 weeks, and that was it. So that was the script. There's more interesting things about that, but I don't know how long you want to go on about
Well,
this
it's
particular.
incredible. So with the filming of it, definitely let us in on your world. This is fantastic, and it's a glimpse into the Night of the Living Dead. So,
Well, I was part of everything all the way through. I mean, there was every second, and
of course,
so George and I were kind of the camera unit, and so he was the main cameraman, but I shot a lot of stuff on 16 millimeter. And while he was shooting 35, like on the Big Posse and Zombie Day, which is mostly done one day a night, I was shooting 16 millimeter. Not when the truck was going to explode. Well, first of all, we're sitting there talking about we're going to be filming all these zombies and the escape attempt and so on. And one of the key, just technical ideas, I said, George, we got to take the camera out of the blimp because we'll never get this all shot in one night, the escape and the truck explosion and so on. So I said, let's just take, the camera. It was a little wee camera we could hold in your hands, except for sync sound, you had to have it encased in an 80-pound blimp, which just seals in the camera sound. That's all it does. So the grinding gears don't get on the sound takes. Right. So I said, there's going to be truck sounds and music and crickets and everything else. And let's just hope we can disguise the gears, the camera sound of the camera gears by using those things. And so that's what we did. And so a lot of just we were all highly skilled at that point with the technical end of everything. But I was the one who would come up with those kind of things. In a lot of cases, they would save the day, Like part of that discussion was that I said, we're going to be tossing all these Molotov cocktails and we've made the point they're dead and they're slow moving. If none of them catch on fire, we're going to look pretty stupid.
Yeah.
Well, we don't have an asbestos suit and we don't have a stunt man. I said, oh, hell, I'll do it. So I pulled when we're getting ready to shoot, I pulled a rumpled brown suit, a couple sizes too big out of the pile of Goodwill clothing we had for zombies. And I wore tight denims, Levi's jacket and pants and so on, and boots that didn't have laces. just thinking maybe I could get out of this suit fast enough if it caught on fire and or too much fire. And so George and I set the camera up, and um, the whole thing, the focus, and it's just the shot. And on action, Carl Hardman was sitting on the stoop of the farmhouse, and he made a puddle of gasoline around my feet and a trail up my legs and back. And on action, he'd toss a match into the puddle, and the flames would shoot up my leg and back, and I would stagger like a zombie until we had it all worked out that when I felt my hair being singed, I could roll over this hill where people were waiting with furniture blankets to put out the fire. And we got 3 takes, and they're all in the movie, 3 different angles.
Wow.
So, and Hardman, of course, anytime any movie when a successful stunt is pulled off, especially a dangerous one, everybody cheers and claps when it's over, and they're kind of thrilled that you're getting this great thing stunt for your movie. And Hardman had this we didn't get along all the time. And I don't think he would have given a shit if I did go up in flames. But that sticks in my mind, just the look of glee in his face when he would toss that match for the 3 takes.
Oh, no.
Anyway, that's how that, and even like at the end of the movie, Russ came up with a lot of key ideas too. And Russ Streiner, who was co-producer with Hardman, and but Russ was the main producer for sure. Hardman didn't have much experience as a film producer, mostly a radio guy. And but somebody came up with the idea that maybe the brother should come back and drag the girl out of the house. And that wasn't my idea, but and I don't know who did. And we really gave that a lot of consideration because we didn't want to blow it and cause people to suspend belief, in what we were doing.
Right.
And we decided, well, because my thought was, okay, he was bashed, his head's bashed against the tombstone, he's vanquished.
Yeah.
And would it work? Well, okay. We're creating these flesh-eating ghouls, and who's to say that his brain might not have been totally destroyed by hitting that tombstone? So maybe he could come back, and it turned out to be one of the iconic scenes of the movie. But the draft of the script, there was only one script written. We did some things that we didn't write in. We just did them, worked them out and did them. But that script has a nice ending. Ben gets shot, which was also my idea, and then the sheriff and the deputy work their way through the wreckage of the house down into the basement, and they're about to shoot Barbara when a tear rolls out of her eye, and so they know she's not a zombie. Or ghoul. We call them ghouls because not all zombies are ghouls. They didn't used to be.
Yeah.
And so the last scene in the movie is the sheriff. She's in that trench coat. Bonfire is being built in the background, and you see Ben's body. The sheriff's trying to get her to take some coffee or something, and Ben's body's being dragged out to the fire. You see that in the background. Pretty good ending, but
yeah.
We did.
It's great. Of course, it's not just iconic, but there's a reason it's iconic. Like, it's really well done. And as I know, because I know you, a lot of that comes from your mind, and you have such a great imagination. Some of the stuff that you come up with is just mind-blowing. I love it. And I want to yeah, it's fantastic.
I just need a few million people to think that. Well, a few million probably do sort of think that way, but
yeah, they do. Well, we need $1 from each one of those guys. But what I want to talk to you.
The other thing is, like, I grew up in a tough mill town. I had my first fist fight when I was 5 years old, George and my mother caught us. I didn't even know I was supposed to fight this other 5-year-old. My mother caught us and beat my ass with a slap from an orange crate, and then grounded me. but but George he grew up in Parkchester, New York, Parkchester section, and he grew up around movie posters because his father was an artist for a national screen or whatever.
Right.
And so he grew up wanting to make movies. That's what he
Right.
wanted to do, and convinced us that we could do them, even though I thought movies were made in Hollywood, until hooking up with George. And but he was dressed every day, kind of prim little boy in a sweater vest with a necktie, And Rudy and I grew up in this mill town, and so did everybody else pretty much around us. And so what I brought to it in another way was just the knowledge of how real action happens.
Mm-hmm. Definitely.
Especially fights. And so
you guys worked
I'll
amazing.
tell you one thing that happened. I'm loading magazines, and I cut through bringing loaded magazines into the living room. And George and Dwayne and Carl were rehearsing. They had the lights were set up and the camera set up, and they were rehearsing the scene where Carl gets the gun and Dwayne has to take it off of him, And so I come in just as Dwayne's holding boards up against the window because the ghouls are breaking in, and he charges across the living room and hits Carl in the chin with his fist. And I said, "What are you doing?" I said, when somebody has a gun on you and you have to take it away, you don't charge at him and try to hit your little fist on the point of his little chin. What you do is you throw a body block into him. And I said, the boards are already coming loose, so let the board come, throw the board to knock the gun aside, and then slam into him.
Yeah.
I illustrated it. Totally knocked the wind out of Carl. He went sagging down, and sagged down the wall onto the floor. I kind of overdid it. I didn't do that on purpose, but it didn't probably endear me to him when our relationship already was rocky.
You were the stunt coordinator for that one too, huh?
Well, yeah, to a great extent, because
you guys did everything.
Have to have a sense of what the real nitty gritty world or else it's not going to be believable.
Yeah, totally.
And a movie fight isn't a real fight. Doesn't even look real. There's nothing to a real fight mostly when it has to be choreographed and staged and so on, and made to look real and more exciting. And so, I've been in a lot of real fights, but a lot of times they're over real quick,
You brought, like you say, that nitty gritty stuff to the table there, and your mind too. You have such a creative, mind and imagination. So it was incredible. And one of the things I want to talk to you about is basically about how as you go to a ton of different conventions, I'm sure you realize that, punk rock or metal and horror kind of go together in lots of ways. Like you've probably seen that. You probably have a lot of fans that come and get autographs and the whole bit. And there's probably a lot of punk rockers or metal fans, right? And I want to ask you about the Return of the Living Dead and how that came together, and what you thought of the way that the punk rockers in it, and then basically how it became such a cult classic. So tell me a little bit about that.
I think it's a great movie. A few months ago, Russ Streiner and I were featured guests at one of at the State Theater of Michigan in Jackson, Michigan, and they wanted to screen Return of the Living Dead and Night of the Living Dead both. I hadn't really watched Return of the Living Dead since it first came out in 1985. I just don't watch things over and over again. The fans do that, and a lot of filmmakers do. I don't.
Yeah,
And
me neither.
but I always liked the movie. I knew Jimmy Carran because he narrated a documentary we had made called Drive-In Madness about the people who made and acted in the drive-in movies. I didn't know Clu Gallagher till much later, but I think it's much better. The movie's much better than Dawn of the Dead is, or almost anything else in the genre. It's a total rewrite from what I did. My original Return of the Living Dead dealt with it was a real continuation of Night of the Living Dead, at least that milieu. It doesn't. I mean, I didn't want it to be an imitation or a remake of in any way of Night of the Living Dead, but Night of the Living Dead dealt with these people in this farmhouse, and I want if Dead's people started coming back to life, there would certainly be religions growing up around that. And so that's how the script starts. And it deals with the breakdown of society that would happen if, after the phenomenon erupted. So then the interesting thing is, I mean, we went through all kinds of things. I was going to direct it, we thought, and then Tom Fox, who had a lot of money, he was from Chicago, and he got we got introduced to him through a young guy who was kind of repping the script, and Tom had optioned it for several times, and then I brought Toby Hooper into it because he said we might need somebody that has more bankable as a director. So I knew Toby, so I brought him into it, and so on. And then I wrote the novel, the straight horror novel. It came out. But I was friends with people in the Sinatra organization that helped us with the Night of the Living Dead lawsuit. And I was friends particularly with Jilly Rizzo, who owned Jilly's in New York, which was Sinatra's favorite hangout in New York at the time. And Tony Nino, Tony and Jilly were Sinatra's two main bodyguards, and they liked me. So they read the book and they asked Frank to produce it. So he's going to produce it for $3 million with me directing. And so I got invited. Lou Grippo, who's our attorney for Night of the Living Dead and my personal friend, and he owned the original Oyster House, Pittsburgh's oldest tavern in the center of town. And my office and studio by that time was right above the Oyster House, his place. So he calls me in his office one day and he says, Sinatra's going to finance Return of the Living Dead for $3 million. He said, we have to go to Las Vegas. We have to go to Caesar's Palace. I said, I can't go to Las Vegas. I don't have any money. Because by that time, all the ripoffs had happened,
Yeah.
He said, shut up, you're going. So the expenses are all paid or put up in the Sinatra suite in Caesar's Palace, in Sinatra Wing, Everything's going great when we get there. I met with Sinatra's daughter, met with Jilly, and so on. And Tony said, what night do you want to go? We can go to the opening night party and the show, and either night we can go to the show, or what do you want to do? And I said, well, why don't we go to the opening night party on the first night and go to the show on the second night? That way we'll have two great nights. He said, okay, done. So he and I are having a drink outside of the theater for the first night's show. This tall blonde woman comes over, very nicely dressed, whispers in Tony's ear. Oh, first of all, I said, Tony, look, because the people were coming out of that show, And I said, those people look like they just saw Invasion from Body Snatchers. Something's the matter. So she whispers in Tony's ear, and Tony told me, said, Frank's mother's plane went down in the mountains. She was on her way to the show. So we did go up to where the party was supposed to be. Frank was there. I had never met, I had several times I was supposed to meet Frank, and different things happened, which are also pretty funny and interesting. But nevertheless, Tony said, I can't introduce you now. I said, I know that. So he
Wow.
went up on another plane trying to find whatever they could find. In any event, she was killed and the whole deal went south. That is when we sold the Tom Fox wanted to buy the property. He said, I want to buy it and make the film my way. So we were strapped for money. We sold it for quite a bit of money. And then eventually Ryan and Hemdale said, well, you can't make straight horror. Straight horror is dead, which is never true. You know, you come up with a good idea, it's just never dead.
Yeah, it's a good
Been
idea.
proven over and over and over again. And so, but in any event, so they hired Dan O'Bannon to do a rewrite, which turned out to be a total rewrite. And then I novelized his script.
Right.
That's
So
maybe as short as I can make that.
that's okay. That's great. Fantastic. How did the punk rockers get in there?
That was all Dan, and I think he used to. I mean, I found out later. I mean, Dan he was really good to work with. I mean, we worked closely. He left me alone to do the script, but he loved it. You know, I mean, the novelization, and I liked the script. I just said, but one thing I said was, you're never going to make this movie for $700,000 because that was supposed to be the budget, you know.
Right.
And I thought these people, that will never happen. What I didn't know was that they were going to get $4 million to do it. You know, I didn't find that out till later. And so they just did a wonderful job. So anyway, but Dan, he was really afraid of all the violence that happened in LA and this and that. He had built a home with steel plates in the walls. He had a lot of guns all over the place. And I never was there, but that's what I was told by the people that did know. And he had stomach trouble all his life, and that's what killed him eventually. So,
So was he afraid of punk
but
rockers?
was he what?
Afraid of punk rockers?
Well, apparently, again, I found I didn't know those people that were cast, and I didn't know what kind of music it was, you know, you're going to have. I think he did have in the script about it being punk. He must have had, because I had to characterize those people in the novel. And, but I knew Linnea also, because she was also in that Drive-In Madness documentary. And she was our first cover girl when we published Screen Queens Illustrated magazine. So I knew her. She was very cute and personable and a bit naive back then. So anyway, I thought the music was, well, obviously the music worked perfectly. I found out later, somebody told me that Dan apparently also frequented the strip clubs, you know, so-called gentlemen's clubs. And that's where he found Jewel Shepard. She was a dancer. And I really like Jewel. I see her quite often. And she's been posting about the fires and everything and the danger she was in. And I always try to be encouraging and sympathetic and empathetic with her. And they're all great. They just did. And somebody said Dan was a real slave driver. Well, maybe so. I mean, what's her name? Not Barbara Randolph. What's her first name?
Oh.
Beverly Randolph.
Oh, yes.
I have a tendency to say Barbara for some reason, even though I see her often at conventions and so on. But crawling through all that water.
Yeah.
But there were just the brilliant things like having her still be in love with infatuated with Freddie, and she just won't let go of him, and you don't know when he's going to turn on her. Dan built a lot of suspense. Sam Raimi at that Michigan theater, I was pointing out, in Night of the Living Dead, we had the girl bitten in the basement. Well, what's going to happen with her?
Right.
And Sam Raimi in Evil Dead, which I said right away, this guy's really talented. And he had brought a lot of energy to Evil Dead, which he did that. He was inspired to do that by Night of the Living Dead. Those guys wanted to do comedies.
Yeah.
Rob Tappert and Sam and what's his name? The lead actor, Ash.
Bruce Campbell.
Bruce Campbell, yeah. And I know him
Got
too.
one name.
I don't see him very often, and the names sometimes elude me, but
Yeah.
they stuck together, which is great. And but I saw Sam and Rob doing stand up in L.A. probably 15 or 20 years ago. Hilarious. But anyway, that's what they wanted to do, comedy. But Night of the Living Dead, they started thinking maybe we need to do something like that. But they had
It's crazy to think about how much that Night of the Living Dead influenced so many projects. Like, I mean, of course, the whole series with The Walking Dead and how massively huge that
Well,
became.
they started out totally plagiarizing Night of the Living Dead.
100%. 100%.
And, but I mean, that's the thing. We all learn from each other, hopefully, and build on it. And the trick is to do that without ripping somebody off or plagiarizing
Yeah,
somebody.
just
Well,
do it.
Sam, I don't even know if he was thinking about the girl that we had bitten in the basement, but he had the goal under the trapdoor, and the trapdoor has a loose chain. And so you never know when that goal is going to burst into the cabin. But those kinds of things are where your head has to be if you're making horror.
Definitely.
As long and it, whether he thought of the girl we had in the basement or not, it was still a damn good idea, and it was different enough.
So when you're thinking of an idea, does an idea just come to mind, like when you're driving the car or whatever just pops in your head? I know you were saying that before, that you just come up with constant things and you're always writing something new. I've read a lot of your scripts and they're incredible. Like I love them. And of course we have a couple projects together, and we have a project, Spawn of the Living Dead, that we're gonna get made within the next year. And that one is like a continuation of Night of the Living Dead with, this completely different twist. So it's like when you're pulling that out of your head, and do you start sometimes where there's like an idea, like, okay, oh, I feel this death. This is a really cool idea for a death, and then write something around it? Or do you end up having an idea? What is your inspiration a lot of the
Well,
time?
it happens all kinds of ways, but Spawn of the Living Dead actually has a real a more firm kind of evolution, because I did a script called Black Cat for Independent International Films. They had distributed my film Midnight, and Sam Sherman called. He was the president of it. We're good friends to this day. But he said, Al, my brain's working in two places at once. But they 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 wanted to do a film called Black Cat and pay me to do the script, give me some points, and Al would direct it. What the hell's his last name? And he was murdered. That's what happened. He got murdered. We didn't make the film, so I wrote the Black Cat script pretty much, and it was similar plot where this family was going west, and because they wanted it to happen out west, and and much later, I thought, well, this went nowhere because of Al's murder, and uh, so I should do this with, instead of the people encountering this family that has this vicious Black Panther and into voodoo and stuff, I should maybe I'll have them encounter zombies out there. So I
Yeah. Spawn of the
rewrote the
Living
whole
Dead is,
concept and turned it into what you
yeah.
finally read. So now I can't ever make more of that because, which I don't care.
Because
But
we have it. Well, and then I did some rewriting of dialogue and threw in more women from my end. So I think we worked kind of cool on that one together. It was
yeah,
fun. And
and it should be made. It's way different from all other zombie films.
yeah, I
The
think
way
so.
the plot develops, and that's the thing. Most of them don't have some kind of original plot. I mean, they just, it's zombies killing people,
Yeah,
and
this
that's it.
definitely does.
But
I
I
love
mean, Dan with Return of the Living Dead, that's what Dan did. He created something totally original, and a whole lot of people like that movie better than they like Night of the Living Dead.
Yeah,
Of
it's
course,
definitely.
it wouldn't exist without Night of the Living Dead, but you
So
know.
So let me know about let us all know here about what you have planned for the summer. I know you have a few things on the go, but you still do conventions and people can
Mhm.
see you at different conventions. How do they find out about that? Like where if there's a convention that they would see.
Well, the fans know all about them. The people that like conventions, and they are a lot of fun, and they pretty much keep track of them. And
Is
uh,
there a website or something people can go to check out all the conventions together?
there's several websites that list all the conventions all around the country and different countries too.
Mhm.
But
There's
I
which
don't
one?
use those. I just, I find out which ones that are the best and try to get those books. And I do it myself now, generally, although I'm going to San Antonio Friday. I have an agent, Isaac Moore, who's in West Virginia, but he he went. He's not an exclusive agent for me. I didn't want him to be. I'd rather book my, because when you have an agent, they start dickering with the promoters of the conventions,
Yeah.
and by the time the dickering's over and it takes so long, you never know where you're going to be or if you're going to be, and then you lose a lot of gigs. Blah blah blah. It's a pain in the ass.
Yeah.
So I just do it myself. I come the end of the year, I just phone or email the promoters that I know or know of, and just get booked. And
Great.
I do like 12 to 15 a year usually.
That's
So
incredible. So also, so you writing another book right now? Because I know you've just put out a
now,
book.
right now, I'm trying to come up with what Frank and the Monsters, what the direction that it needs to go.
Yeah.
And so I'm
That's
not,
another thing we got going on, Frank and the Monsters. That's a
yeah, I'm not, I've
pretty cool
done
thing.
so much in the last 3 years of, I don't know, I have to figure out what I'm going to do next after maybe getting Frank worked out. But you don't know what's going to pop up.
Never know. You
Hmm.
never know. Definitely. And we're going to work on Spawn of the Living Dead too. I actually have more meetings coming up for that. So I'm excited. And I should let you go because I know you are kind of busy and you got some stuff going on there. And I want to just say thank you so much for coming on board and talking to us about your experience. And it's really cool to find out about the backstories from Night of the Living Dead and Return of the Living Dead, because Return of the Living Dead was a real punk classic and it, a real
Yeah,
cult classic, right? And I think that
I know. Which one did Misfits did the music for Dawn of the Dead? I think,
I
or
think
Day
so.
of the Dead, or one of them.
Yeah, one of those. I can't.
Anyway, we were. talking about Guar, we were the other day,
Yes.
but they
You've
have
got a
used
lot
to
of
have.
friends who are kind of in the punk circle too, right? You got a
Oh
lot
yeah, I know
Snyder.
a lot of the punk, the heavy metal bands,
Yeah,
because they're going to Guar concerts and then through Brad Roberts and his wife Nicole and Guar.
yeah,
But we went to the barbecue. They used to have
yeah.
this barbecues for several years on a lake in Richmond. So, when Dave Brocky died, they did a mock funeral there. They actually had a boat, with
Yeah.
it became a funeral pyre. They set it on fire and all that stuff. So when we arrived, me and Gary Vincent and Rob Lucas, who they were the two co-producers on Michael John as a Zombie, but that hadn't happened yet. But when we got there, the Misfits were were barbecuing. They have these octagonal, really great uh, picnic pavilions, and they were off to one side. They're barbecuing and lifting weights. And they're in real good muscular shape, and they have these weights that are all. I had never seen them back because I still work out with weights, but they have them where the one piece sits in front side of the other, so they're very compact to be traveling with, And
Wow.
they wanted us to join them and eat, but I think we had already eaten anyway. So Jerry only gave me their uh, new vinyl album, Land of the Dead, and I gave him a signed Night of the Living Dead script signed by me and Romero. So,
Cool.
um, so anyway, so I know them. And Rob shot the Slayer video that was the #1 music video of 2015.
Wow,
That
that's cool.
the one shot in a prison.
Oh yeah, what's that
You
song?
ever see that? It's really good.
My mind is a blank today. I don't know why, but it's
Yeah, I couldn't think of Bruce Campbell, no. Al, for Christ's sake, and I know Al. One of his girlfriends was even in the. Let me see. Grab something. Uh,
I'll have some hold music for us. Da 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 da. I'll play some torch music for you there, John. I know you love the torch. Da da do 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 da 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 da
oh, here it is.
da. Zombies rule.
There's my stuff on the floor.
Okay, here we go. Back at it.
This is Al Adams and Why in the Hell I couldn't think of it. But this is
Oh, cool.
Tim Ferranti, my friend who used to write for Fangoria. He wrote this book and he asked me to write an afterword. So I wrote the afterword about Sam, Sam is one of the most honorable and intelligent people I ever met in the movie business. So I wrote this thing, and then Sam liked it so much he made it the forward of this.
Wow.
It came out a year or two ago. That's not why, but I just wanted to look at it to remember Al's name, for Christ's sake. And why? For some reason, this cable keeps coming loose.
It happens.
But I wanted to say also, yeah, I listened to your new album, and I mean, at least one of the songs on it, and thought it was great. And
Oh, well, thank you.
good luck with that.
Oh, thank you so much. Yeah, with the political landscape out there, I know you are in agreement with me with all the stuff that's happening and
America.
how insane it
Is
is.
that the title of it, America? Isn't it?
No, that's one song. It's called The Last Steps of Man
Yeah,
Undefined.
I think that's the only one
Yeah, it's
that
pretty
I
intense.
watched.
But yeah, it's to me it's pretty insane what's going on down there, and being a Canadian up here, it's a little, it's a little different.
It's all the way insane.
Oh.
I called Russ up to tell him about this thing on the web right now. the French member of the French Parliament wrote an article, and he wants to take back. He said, you don't used to be welcoming people, the poor and the abused and the huddled masses and all that. And now you apparently despise them and you despise the Statue of Liberty, so we'll take it back.
Oh yeah.
Just send it back.
Yeah.
And it makes you laugh even though it's so true.
Yeah, I know. You gotta
It's
laugh
horrible.
to cry. I know it's me like these days.
Guess
Okay.
what? Ratings are up.
Oh. What did you say? Sorry.
Hmm?
What did you say? I missed it.
Trump's approval rating is back up to 47% now. How in the hell can that be?
I have no
People
idea.
are just demented.
Yeah, it's pretty demented. I'm not sure how it's all happening. It almost seems like some sort of twisted circus, and I just I'm watching and kind of like the monkeys are taking over. It's like,
Yeah.
it's pretty crazy.
Horrible.
Well, I'm sorry. Okay, well, thank you so much. And we're going to talk more about later on, me and you, without the cameras. We're going to talk more about Frank and the Monsters, and I got some really cool ideas too. So we'll talk about those. But
Yeah, I don't have anything crystallizing. The only thing
I got some good stuff. Don't say anything.
huh? Okay.
Don't say anything on camera.
All right.
Okay.
All right. See you later.
Okay,
Good
hon, we'll
luck.
talk later. Talk to you. Thank you. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Okay,
Thank
bye,
you.
hon.